Hey everyone, Heather Williams here with the California After School Network, and we are here for another Fireside Chat. It's been a while, but as always, we are joined by Michael Funk from the California Department of Education Expanded Learning Division, and then a couple special guests. And so today we've got Ginger Shea from Oxnard School District, and she is joined by Rachel Champagne, who's one of their partners. And so we'll get into in just a few minutes how they work together. But today we are going to be talking about ELO-P and licensing. This is a hot topic in the field right now, and there's a lot to unpack here. So with the most recent budget that passed and all the trailer bills that passed along with it, there were some different changes to ELO-P, and we'll talk about some of those in a variety of fireside chats. But licensing is really kind of become the hot topic. So we're going to focus today on chatting about that. And so, Michael, I think we'll just get right into it. So I'm going to share my screen so that everybody can see some slides we've got. All right, and hopefully that all looks good. And we'll jump right in. So as I mentioned, in July, we're still in July for one more day. In July, the governor signed a handful of trailer bills, and in particular, SB 114 is the Education Omnibus Budget Trailer Bill. And so this included changes to our California Education Code, we call it Ed Code or whatnot for short, to update some different items for the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, and in particular, and so we'll share this link to this slide deck when you are viewing this, so you can follow along and click on these different links if you want to go in and read them. But we're going to talk about this particular section that addresses licensing. And so this is the first, there's 4 paragraphs, A through D, so we'll go through kind of all of those quickly. I'll kind of generally explain what it means, and then have Michael offer some additional feedback, and then we'll jump into conversation with Ginger and Rachel to talk about what does this really mean for a district. So the first paragraph, an expanded learning opportunity program shall not be required to comply with the requirements, and then it lists some of this code here, and I'll just go to the next slide. Basically, this is cross-referencing other parts of state law, and so this is just saying an expanded learning opportunity program is not required to comply with the Early Education Act and the Early Care and Learning Regulations. So for those of you that are familiar with those, that is what this is linking to. This one's pretty straightforward, so I'm just going to keep moving along. And then this is the big one. Basically, an expanded learning opportunity program, pursuant to this section, may operate without obtaining a child daycare facility license or special permit. And then it links to the health and safety code around California child daycare and daycare centers. So again, this cross-references other state code that talks about licensing. So these 2 paragraphs outline an expanded learning opportunities program does not need to have a license or permit that comes up with these different state laws. And so this is something that for folks who were following along when the May revise came out, there was some proposals that some of our expanded learning opportunity programs might need to be licensed in certain instances. And with this legislation, that has been removed, and this clarifies they in fact do not need to be licensed. There's 2 other paragraphs that get into more details on this, but that's basically what's in the first half of this. Michael, anything before we get into the more technical?
No, I think A and B is what we worked almost a year to get into place when we found that without realizing it, in the whole first year, the education code that exempts ACEs in 21st century was not referenced in ELO-P. And so this has been a point of murkiness, and in working with community care licensing and the California Department of Social Services, they realized the gray area here, and we had a great agreement with the community care licensing to suspend on visiting and investigating, visiting expanded learning opportunity programs. There was some visits and some confusion about, well, this doesn't technically say it's license exempt. So everyone agreed to hold off on any kind of enforcement and inspections and work to get the language clear. And so I think you can see from A and B, it's crystal clear that the ELO-P is license exempt.
Yeah. And Michael, I think you kind of alluded to some things that are important to note. ACEs in 21st century have been license exempt. So I think some folks were confused when the May revise came out, and then when the budget came out, this whole conversation around licensing and why ELO-P would require licensing or alternatively would not. And so ACEs in 21st century historically have been license exempt. And the intent when ELO-P was created was that it would also be license exempt. But anytime you create a new program and put things into law, there's always cleanup that needs to happen. And so this is one of those areas that they discovered what they intended was not outlined as clearly as it needed to be in law. So,
and then Heather, just you're probably going to get to this, but you did mention the May revised version of the budget trailer bill. When that came out, it did state clearly that a program operated by a third party, that's anyone contracting with the LEA, that operates a TK or K program in a location other than a school campus, had to be licensed. And I just want to be clear, that's gone. So when we say ELO-P is license exempt, it's everything. TK and above, off campus, on campus.
yep. So now that that's crystal clear, we're going to make it confusing again. So I'm going to go to the next paragraph. So paragraph C has, since this came out, has caused a little bit of confusion, and hopefully we can offer much clarity today. And so this basically talks about if you are an expanded learning opportunity program operated by a third party that holds a child daycare license or special permit. So if you are a third party, you are currently contracted to run ELO-P, and you also happen to have a license or permit as of June 1st this year, you are required by this law to maintain that license or permit as a requirement of contracting through June 30th, 2024. Now, folks have read this and assumed this means that you must operate your ELO-P with a license or permit and follow those requirements. That is not what this says. It just says you must maintain that organization, that entity must maintain their license. So if you have a bunch of ELO programs and you decided, oh, we're not going to operate any licensed programs anymore, it doesn't matter. You would still need to maintain your license through June 30th, 2024, but it does not impact requirements for licensing for ELO-P. It is still, ELO-P is still a license exempt program. Anything to add?
Yeah. Well, this is why just in a minute with Rachel and Ginger talking about this, and Rachel, just before we turned on the recorder, you had shared some excellent examples, and I think that's going to be really helpful. But what I just want to when we read ed code, we have to be very careful not to read more into it based on our opinion or our thoughts or our assumption or what we wish to be true. So the bottom line is paragraph C is about agencies maintaining their license. It has nothing to do with what requirements they have to follow for the program that they operate. Program that they operate, and this will be the next paragraph. Just want to be clear. If the only funding is ELO-P, ACES, 21st century, any one or a combination of those, if an agency is licensed, they only have to follow the program requirements of expanded learning. So I just want to try to say it. I know Heather just said that, but sometimes we have to say it in different ways, and then we'll listen to Ginger and Rachel explain what that looks like on the ground. So let's jump to the next paragraph and get to that conversation.
So this is a very fun, long paragraph to read. So I tried to break it up and format it so that maybe it's a little bit easier to read. Still not the easiest thing in the world to read. So the first part of this, just in a different way, basically states that if you are operating an ACES program, a 21st century program, or an ELO-P, as Michael said, either standalone or some combination of those three funding sources, then your program is license exempt. Nothing in all of what this says exempts other programs. And so if you have let's just say you have a privately funded program, fee for service program, there's no funding attached to it from any of these funding sources, and you just want to run an after school program and you call it an expanded learning opportunity program. That doesn't make it license exempt. It also doesn't mean it needs a license. There's a lot of requirements that are outlined in terms of when a license is necessary, but this just really wanted to clarify that when a program is license exempt is when it's attached to these three funding sources, either standalone or in some combination together, because we do recommend one comprehensive program. Now, this is the second part of this, and so this is also complicates it a little bit more. If multiple funding sources are used and there's a conflict in program requirements, then that means you would go with the stricter requirements, the funding source with the stricter requirements. So in this case, if you were combining ELO-P funds with childcare funds that required a license, for example, then the program requirements for childcare that are stricter would come into play. So this is, again, adding another layer of complexity to this law. And I also wanted to note in particular, this applies to program requirements, not fiscal requirements, because we do get a lot of questions about that. And I know, Michael, you can expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, go back one slide, please, Heather. Part of the confusing here is, notice the first sentence. It says expanded learning opportunity program in lowercase letters. That's where some of the confusion is coming from, because that means generically. So I'm going to give like a little math story problem. Ginger at Oxnard is going to contract with Funk's Fabulous Flag Football Club to run a program for middle school. And she's not going to give them any money. She's not contracting me. There's an agreement for me to provide the program, and I'm actually going to charge fees. But I don't get ACES, 21st century, or ELO-P. So this is saying I'm like a lowercase expanded learning opportunity program, and I am not exempt from licensing, no matter what I say about my program. Point I want to make, though, does that mean I'm required to be licensed? Because some people have made that assumption. And the answer is, it depends. And Rachel and Ginger can talk more about that. But once again, you could read more into this. What this says is I'm not exempt. Whether I need to be licensed or not will apply to many different things. So sign up today for Funk's Fabulous Flag Football program, and I'll charge you a nice fee, and I'll keep your kids safe. So Ginger, welcome. Rachel, welcome. Ginger, we've been on the chat before. You've and had a lot of involvement at the state level, helping us out with many different policy items. And so thank you for coming on and for introducing Heather and I to Rachel today. And I'll turn it to you to introduce Rachel and your partnership and tell us what this looks like on the ground.
Well, thank you for inviting us to be here today. I am very excited to invite Rachel to be part of the conversation. Rachel has been a partner with our district for many years, working with our early childhood education programs, and the opportunity and expansion with ELO-P was an excellent fit for us to pull together and really address what our needs are in order to design a program for K and TK at all of our school sites. First, I think that there are a lot of ways people are looking at the program types. I would articulate that I am a school district, and in the majority of our programs, we are running our kinder and TK programs on our school site. That with it brings kind of managing and looking at how we pull this together so that it's all one program. Working with Rachel and her program have made that a lot easier for our kids to be successful and participate in that. Another option as we're looking at trying to expand might be to partner with them in their locations that are off of our school campuses. And so working together with Rachel, we've been navigating the legislation to come up with what's best for our kids. Rachel, you've been working with Catalyst Kids for, I think you said several years. I won't put a number on it.
Okay.
But I would invite you to chime in with how it has been working together and navigating some of the language with ELO-P.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for including me in the conversation. Catalyst Kids is a statewide agency, so we operate up and down the state of California. And our mission in our agency is really to meet the needs of the community. So what you see us operating in Oxnard, excuse me, may look significantly different than what you see in Sacramento, because we are really about meeting where the gaps are for that school district or that community. Working with Ginger, what she identified her gap to be is, hey, we can't do the TK and the K. We don't have the workforce. We're not into the TKK game. And so I say to her, we've been doing childcare for 4-year-olds for 40 years. So we'll help you out. Where's the facilities? And Ginger says, don't worry about facilities. We'll find an appropriate space and bathroom for your TK and your Ks. And so while we're used to running licensed care and have been for 40 years, we realized that ELO-P did not need to be licensed. And so we say to Ginger, what do you need from us? And we come in with what she needs. We did the hiring, we staff the program, we give her a budget of what our materials are needed, and we joined her staff development days, and we just work together. It's something new for us, but it's been a very exciting time.
Well, so in addition, you often call me saying, hey, other programs are asking about this, and navigating back and forth with requirements. I think most recently it's been 6 o'clock and 9 hours, and how that comes together.
So historically, our agency runs an after-school program with contract money from the Department of Education. And they have certain guidelines and requirements of days of operation and how long a family can attend your licensed after school program. And so being an unlicensed after school program, I really needed to rely on Ginger, like making sure we're compliant and meeting the needs of the audit guide and of her program planning. So it's definitely a lot of communication and partnership.
Rachel,
And
let me
I-
just chime in with a quick question, if I may, just before
Yes.
we move on, because you've obviously done this for decades.
Yes.
Moving into an unlicensed TK and K program, can you say a bit about what elements of best practice that you're bringing into that, even if it's not spelled out in the ed code?
Yes. Our agency, first and foremost, takes supervision and health and safety very, very, I mean, it's the most important thing. And so what we've just done is we've brought over how our supervision, all of our training around health and safety, all of our training around first aid, CPR, viruses, all of that. We were committed to our non-licensed programs having the same sort of health and safety oversight as our Title 22 programs. And I'm very thankful for that. So all of that work was already embedded in our infrastructure. So it was very simple to just move it over.
Yeah.
In terms of curriculum, we took highlights from our licensed after school curriculum. And for every school district that we work with, we just run our curriculum by them and they'll say, oh, we need a little bit more of this, or we need a little bit more of that. And then we tweak our curriculum to the needs of that district.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I would go back, Rachel, to just kind of touch on the last slide that Heather shared, which was if multiple funding sources are used, that the program
Oops.
requirements shall be resolved in favor of the funding source with stricter requirements.
Correct.
And so your question that came to me was about 9 hours or 6 p.m. And those are actually two different funding sources. And so if a program is being run joint with ACES, along with ELO-P, that 6 p.m. open requirement becomes part of the equation. There are some other examples that you've shared with how the language that's clarified here has really impacted your ability to work and navigate within our community. Could you share a little
Yes.
bit more about that?
Yes. Thank you for the question. We're currently working with a school district where facilities are just not available. And they're really trying to meet the needs of everybody and give everybody who's eligible the after school program experience. And so what I've been working with that school district is to say, you know, we've got a portable on a certain campus. It is licensed with Title 22. It does have fee-based families attending, and it also has low-income families attending, funded by the Department of Education. But the fire marshal says we can see 70 children a day. And school district ABCD, we're only seeing 60. So let us take about 10 of your ELO-P children. We'll embed them in our Title 22 program. We'll have to go by Title 22 regulations, which means smaller ratios. There's other things that Title 22 requires of us, but the children won't see it. And it's actually a beautiful model. You have middle income families who are paying a tuition. You've got funded low income families with Department of Education, and you have ELO-P. And it's a beautiful way to maximize facility. It's a beautiful way to maximize the workforce. And it's a beautiful way to blend all sorts of families together.
What I want to just emphasize as a point of practice is the kids don't walk around with labels
Correct.
saying to the kids, it's one program.
Correct.
And in this case, ELO-P is not, you're not running the ELO-P program. ELO-P is another funding source to allow you to expand the program that's licensed in that facility.
And it allows for this beautiful menu for families to choose from, because our after school program that is licensed and funded with the Department of Education requires us to run 246 days out of the year. So if a family wants more services than say the 180 plus the 30 days of intercession, they can access our funded, and still everybody is together in the same building.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great example.
I think it's really important to highlight that funded or licensed after school programs can coexist on the same campus as non-licensed after school programs. And it really speaks to the mission of what the state of California was trying to do, was increase the options for services for families and don't limit them to the 1 or 2 options. And so there absolutely is room for everybody on the campus, licensed, non-licensed. We can pull it off together, which only enhances the community.
Absolutely. I think that's at the heart of this, developing, building partnerships to serve our students.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know we don't have a ton of time left because we have a short amount of time for our fireside chat today, but I'm wondering, I'm going to ask both Rachel and Ginger to just give some advice to folks who might be sitting in similar shoes, a similar situation. And so, right, we have a lot of districts who just are really unsure of how to tackle the TKK situation, whether it's facilities or workforce or staffing. And it can feel overwhelming. And even though folks are supposed to have programs up and running, we know folks are still figuring it out. And so, Ginger, from your perspective, really thinking about like, where do you start? How do you're fortunate that you had an existing partnership you could build on, but what were you looking for in a partnership for this? And any other strategies you would have for district folks. And then Rachel, from your perspective, we get a lot of folks that are like, yeah, we want to partner with the school district. And they're just really unsure how to do that. But it seems like you've come up with some really great strategies for partnering with a lot of different diverse districts. So what advice you would offer to other partners, community-based organizations, third-party folks who are really trying to partner with districts about how to tackle this in particular with the TK and K students?
I know, I'll give you a minute to think on that. My advice has been the same as this ELO-P has come in. I think that most of us in the field, doesn't matter what direction we're coming from, whether we're an early childhood background or we're P12 or K12 background, it doesn't matter where we're coming at this. I think when you look at the language in the legislation and you take off your own restrictions and look at it in the broadest sense of the definition, that allows you to see the possibility for additional solutions. So for me, it's look at how broad or how loose you could describe this, because your own interpretation is influenced by your own background, and there might be something to opening that up just a little bit more.
And Ginger, I know you do that well because you're texting me or reaching out to other folks like, hey, I'm interpreting this way. Is that true? And so we have really, and I appreciate that because that's good conversation for me. I'm like, yeah, this is simple. It means this. Like, isn't that obvious? Like, people should just know they have the flexibility. But to your point, like, we bring our backgrounds and can think something's more restrictive. And so, in addition to what you said, just reaching out to folks and getting clarity. And so we have people come to office hours and ask those questions. And then we know, right, okay, we need to be even more explicit that you can do this, or this is a requirement, this is not. So yeah, really appreciate that advice, Ginger. And Rachel, I'll turn it over to you.
I think as trite as this sounds, I think we all have to be committed to innovation. And I'm very thankful that I have a leadership team that I report to that just hammers that home all the time. There's very little we can't pull off. If the community needs it, we need to figure out a way to serve the community. And I tell you, if you would have asked me 5 years ago, would I be in the game of non-licensed care? I would, no, I'm not going to be in the game of non-licensed care. And then I realized I need to be in the game of non-licensed care. If I'm not in the game, I am omitting services to hundreds of families for Ventura County. So there needed to be a shift in my thinking and more of what is possible and not what is not possible. And because of that shift in thinking, Our agency now, this time last year, we were serving 0 ELO-P families. We are now close to 900 ELO-P families. And had I stuck with the mindset of I don't do licensed childcare, what a shame. What a shame that would have been for our families of California. So I encourage you to go to the table with school districts about what are you needing and what is possible, and then really problem solve what is possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. Much appreciation for coming on today and tackling probably one of our more challenging topics with ELO-P. So appreciate you both, and especially appreciate your intention in meeting the needs of your community, right? Of your students, of your families, and that being your number one priority. So
Yeah.
thank you both. And Michael, I'll pass it to you for some closing comments.
I'm struck by what Heather just mentioned, and that is, Ginger and Rachel, both of you have been so clear and articulate in this whole conversation about what communities and families need and what you can provide to open up more for kids. And I wish more conversations were like that. I'm in quite a few conversations that are mostly rural centered, like what are my constraints? I especially like the fact, Rachel, that you even changed your own way of thinking based upon what you saw was possible for families and kids. And that's what I refer to as leading with love.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep. It's clear. For the rest of you out in Fireside Chat land, we're going to be back on a more regular schedule. We're committed to take smaller bite size. Like normally we might have tried to cover everything that's in the trailer bill, and there's a lot more. And it gets too broad too fast and doesn't get clear enough. So this is a great opportunity, a great example of where we're going to try to go to take small chunks, break it down, and bring on people who are living this out and bringing them in front of you. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you on the next chat.
Thanks, everyone.